On this episode of That Was a Show, Camp Wilder was a show. In this 1992 sitcom, after the death of her parents, a 28-year-old single mother moves back to her hometown to be the guardian of her two teenage siblings. Because of her young age and laissez-faire style of parenting, the house becomes a safe haven for a gaggle of teens. Join Brynn, Aaron, and Barry as they find out what it's like to hang out at Camp Wilder.
We grew up during peak sitcom, Seinfeld, Friends, The Fresh Prince. But those shows were diamonds in the rough. This podcast is not about those diamonds. It's about the rough. Some sitcoms were briefly popular in their time. Some were canceled almost immediately. You probably won't recognize most of these, and you'll ask, that was a show?
That was a show?
The podcast about failed or forgotten sitcoms from the 80s and 90s, starring
Brynn Byrne,
Aaron Yeger,
and Andrew Helmer as Barry.
a Radio Gizmo production.
Hi friends, Barry here. Just a quick disclaimer before this week's episode. I recently adopted a cute little rescue kitty. You may hear some tiny meows in the background as she gets used to me podcasting instead of showering her with constant love and affection. Please ignore her tiny but adorable pleas. She's fine. Hey guys, what's going on?
Oh, it's Sunday. We're doing a podcast. That whole thing.
Yes, indeed.
We're tired. We got up very early. Brynn came out to support me. I went for a run this morning. First in-person race in more than 2 years.
Ugh, he has to brag about his race.
Why would somebody do that voluntarily?
But seriously, though, I'm very proud of Aaron. He's, taken his running hobby to like new levels. He's become very fast and very proficient.
It's very fast. I like that.
Yeah.
He is, though. You would not know it to look at him, but he can run really fast.
That's one of my favorite Seinfeld references.
For all you kids out there, Seinfeld is now on Netflix. So you should, instead of listening to this, you should just probably turn it off and just go put on Seinfeld.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I wonder if the youngins are gonna take to Seinfeld like they did Friends like a while back,
Maybe. I mean,
yeah.
It's hard to say because I like many people, I just threw it back on and started watching it, and I was kind of amazed like how quickly it gets funny. Like,
Yeah.
Not that it's like, the pilot is funny and all that, but like when you're watching it, you're like, okay, there's a lot to work out here. But like 3-4 episodes in, they're firing on all cylinders. And by the time the second season starts, like, it's really good.
Yeah.
By the time they figure out that the Jerry-Elaine relationship should not be some sort of will they or won't they, and that Elaine
Yeah.
should not be treated the way women are in most sitcoms at that time as the like, oh, you guys character. Like once they realize, no, she's the best slapstick and ridiculous comic out of all of them, then it's just,
Yeah.
it's just so, it's off to the races.
Yeah. And once Kramer, they realize he's not going to stay in his apartment the whole time. Like
Yeah.
Kramer starts the show as a shut-in, but obviously that does not last for more than a few
He
episodes.
does?
Yeah, Jerry in the first episode, he claims that Kessler, not Kramer, Kessler hasn't left his apartment
weird.
in 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a wild thing.
And he's very much an outside character in the first season. Like he's Jerry's neighbor only. He's not friends with George or Elaine. He comes in and they're there, but they don't really have a relationship with him. So, yeah.
Apparently, the Seinfeld network order after the pilot was and still holds the record to date as the smallest order for a TV comedy ever. Because after the pilot, they ordered 4 episodes.
4 episodes, yeah, because like the first season is like 5 episodes, right?
And
including the pilot.
Yes, and the network was like salty on basically everything they were trying to do until the ratings got huge. Like they just never had faith that any of these ideas would work out. And apparently, like when they submitted the Chinese restaurant episode, which today is remembered as one of the most innovative things that they did, and something that like a lot of shows have copied, that kind of let's have it take place in real time in one location sort of thing. Like they almost canceled the series after that.
Yeah, they were like, what is this
like,
bullshit?
What are you guys doing, you amateurs? Get off our network.
instead of like what networks do now, where they're like, oh, you wrote a bottle episode, you're building one set and that's it? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at all the money they're saving.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
So this week on That Was a Show, we decided to cover Seinfeld, which was a really...
Because this podcast is about failed or forgotten sitcoms.
Okay.
And so it's...
And it is both, obviously.
Obviously. What did we actually cover, Barry?
So this week we watched Camp Wilder. It's a show that I mostly picked because of the cast. And, you know, it was a TGIF show, so I kind of felt like it would be an easy watch. And, you know, it was. It was pretty easy to watch. I'll do a little...
Tell everybody what it's about.
Yeah, what's it about?
Yeah.
The show centered around the Wilder family. After the death of her parents, single mother Ricky, played by Mary Page Keller, moves back to her hometown with her young daughter Sophie, played by Tina Majorino. There she is tasked with raising her two teenage siblings, 16-year-old Brody, played by Jerry O'Connell, and her young teen sister Melissa, played by Megan Haldeman. Rounding out the cast are Brody's best friends, Danielle, played by future Oscar winner Hilary Swank, Beth, played by Margaret Langrick, and Dorfman, played by Jay Mohr. The show mostly centers around the type of household Ricky cultivates by her laid-back and trusting style of parenting, which makes for a home that Ricky and his friends feel comfortable hanging out and being themselves in. The show lasted for 20 episodes, but only 19 aired. We watched the pilot and episode 17, Love Stinks.
All right.
So what happens in the pilot?
Well, so the pilot kind of plays around with the premise a bit by having it tested right off the bat. Danielle's mom starts to object to her hanging around this house after finding out that Ricky lets them watch R-rated movies. Specifically, Thelma and Louise, which she objects to like crazy. Feeling that perhaps she's not being a good parental figure, Ricky decides to try to flex this by forbidding Brody from going to the biggest party of the year. If he goes, she claims she'll send him to live with Grandma. The two clash, and Brody goes anyway. After returning from a very wild but mostly uneventful thematically party, she grounds him and schedules a dinner with Grandma to get her advice. After realizing that Brody is doing just fine under her tutelage, and realizing that there are different parenting styles, she actually apologizes to Brody, which is a kind of a weird reversion to how these stories play out usually. In a subplot, Sophie is told by her Aunt Melissa that the tooth fairy comes at night and removes your teeth, and she becomes fascinated with teeth. That's actually the whole subplot.
So the whole Thelma and Louise thing really... I was very confused by that because it is really not that edgy a movie at all. Like, yes, there's crime, there's like a murder, but it's like not violent, you know? It makes me wonder...
Swearing pretty much, but...
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's like, you know, it's a movie where gender norms and like are questioned and like feminine. It's like kind of a feminist movie. It's about like a female friendship and whatever. So maybe that's what Danielle's mom had a problem with.
Maybe,
I don't know.
maybe Barry.
I think it's a perfect example, actually. It took me a while to really get it, but I was like, you're right. Like, it's basically showing that she's letting them watch R-rated movies, but she knows that Thelma and Louise isn't really a big deal for them to see. Because, like, it is a good, you know, it has a good message and it is a feminist movie and, like, the girls really react to it. So it's like, it shows that she is doing fine because it's not like she's just arbitrarily banning them from watching things. But yeah, at first I was like, why? What's with all this discourse on Thelma and Louise?
Yeah, they make such a meal out of references to Thelma and Louise. Barry, can you settle a bit of confusion I have over character ages? I don't know if I trust Wikipedia on
You can't.
this
It's wrong.
part of the explanation.
There's the Wikipedia descriptions are wrong in general. Brody is probably 16, 17. They don't really get into it. I think Melissa, they say she's 13, but I don't think she is. But then Wikipedia also says that the girls are her friends. They're not. They're Brody's friends.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is something that Brynn and I were discussing, and I was under.
Aaron was getting confused because there are too many brunette girls that look the same.
Well, I went off. I went off the
It's very
Wikipedia
confusing.
description where it presented the
Yeah.
Hilary Swank character as being the younger sister's friend, and
No.
I'm like, she's literally the same age in real life as
Jerry O'Connell.
Like
Yeah.
both of them in real life were 18 when this was shot.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to believe that an 18-year-old plays a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
But I'm like, there's no way she's supposed to be 13, is there? Because it makes no sense.
She's definitely Brody's age because she goes to the party with Brody and the
Right.
sister doesn't. So that just shows you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I actually can imagine the description being something a network understood because like they were like, well, the girls hang out with the girl, right? But really, it's kind of like an unorthodox like group of friends you didn't really see on TV that much. Like Brody's, has two female best friends along with Dorfman, and there's no romance between any of them.
Yeah.
They're just a group of friends who hang out, and like it's awesome.
Yeah, it's nice, but also just I think it's too many characters.
It is too many characters.
I think
we could have.
There should have been like one girl, like it should have been like I found the one character like sorry Beth, but she felt superfluous. Like they really should have just had like the Danielle and Dorfman.
Yeah.
It felt too cluttered. It felt like too many.
I think the reasoning being, and you don't get a lot of this in the 2 episodes we watched, but at least from the premise of the show, it's basically because of how young Ricky is, teens feel comfortable hanging out there.
Yeah.
And there's a revolving door of them.
Right.
Like, apparently Jared Leto is on a few episodes as somebody who just hangs out at the house.
Yes.
And it's just like, yeah, I agree. I think there's too many of them. I bet you would have seen Beth go away. As the show went on.
Maybe, yeah.
But
she's in the main titles.
No, I'm saying like if the show got picked up for another season,
maybe.
you would have seen their writer off because because like what are you gonna do when the other kids get friends? You're gonna have more and more kids hanging out in the house? It's too many damn kids, man.
Yeah.
I tend to agree that the main cast seemed a little too big and complicated. I don't mind the idea that there's like a revolving door of other teenagers as like people who come and go in various episodes. But yeah, I agree. It got confusing. And if you are going to have that big of a cast, at least choose actors who aren't all the same type.
Well, yeah.
How many thin brunettes can you fit into one house?
Yeah. And it's
and then the sister is also complicates things.
Yeah. But now that you've cleared up the age thing, now I think the Thelma and Louise plot makes even less sense because if there's an objection to a 13-year-old watching Thelma and Louise, I can kind of see how you'd pull on that thread. But if they're supposed to be friends with the Jerry O'Connell character, then they're definitely mature enough to watch that movie.
Yeah.
The show knows that, but they're saying that she has a protective mother who won't let her watch R-rated movies.
Oh, I get that.
The show understands that there's no problem with them watching it. In fact, I was really interested to see in this that I kept thinking like it was thumbing its nose at things, but it was really just being like kids are, 16-year-old kids are more mature than TV usually gives them credit for.
Right.
And this show was kind of doing that, like where it was like, no, they're all fine. Because when they go to that big party, it's outrageous, but like nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
They don't have to learn any lessons or anything.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, that makes sense. But I guess the fact that Ricky has her confidence in parenting affected by this, like, I feel like she may have not needed to react so much to like, okay, this one girl's parent doesn't like the idea of her letting them watch Thelma and Louise. maybe she would have just brushed that off. Like it kind of seemed like the fact that she was even willing to go along with questioning, like, oh, am I wrong? Is a little unbelievable. Shifting gears slightly, the opening titles are like the most early 90s thing I've ever seen in my life. It's like the that font, it's like the typographical equivalent of like a neon rollerblading outfit.
Yeah. They also do the Arrested Development thing, which explains the convoluted cast, because in the opening credits, it specifies
who everyone is,
who's everybody's relationship to Ricky is, which is what they do with Arrested Development.
And I think it works on Arrested Development, but here it's clearly like, oh, we got to explain who all these different brunette white girls are. Like, like it's just it's very weird. Yeah.
It's also a wolf. It's a wolf theme.
Yeah, it's a wolf theme. Yeah. Shout out to Jonathan Wolf once again.
Yeah, and it's a theme that perfectly captures that. I guess it's kind of like a skateboarder surfer sort of vibe from in that early 90s framework. It almost feels like the theme is very Dorfman connected.
And okay, why is he just Dorfman?
Because he's a sitcom character.
Yeah, he's just Dorfman.
Now, is it the fact that this was 1992 and, you know, we obviously ran our mouths a bit about Seinfeld in the opening of this episode. Yeah. Was it like trying to be like a teenager ripoff of a Kramer type?
Maybe.
Like Dorfman.
Well, I mean, Kramer's a type himself, right? So Dorfman, Kramer was coming into it anyway. Like it fits a role, like an Urkel, a Fonz. He's the funny one.
They were trying, they were trying to do that breakout neighbor character.
But I just mean that Kramer was the only one who literally had no first name at the time, and of course later on we learned that it's Cosmo Kramer. But in 1992, it was just Kramer.
Right.
I feel like they actually do give Dorfman a name. I just didn't bother to learn it.
Yeah, no, it wasn't worth it.
It's funny because he's Jay Mohr's great. He's has some really funny line deliveries in this too.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting that the show kind of kept surprising me and like how grounded it actually was, because even like Dorfman, as outrageous as he was, like he was still, it was season 1, so maybe this would have changed, but he was still like clearly just a human, like normal person. He's just kind of a little weird.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so if anyone out there has heard of the expression or genre of a hangout show, but hasn't seen one, this is a hangout show. Like, this is...
very much so.
This is like the embodiment of the 1990s hangout
literal
show.
sense.
Yeah.
This is, because it was a TGIF show, this is definitely like, I would say the most hangout TGIF show I've seen. It's not very it's not necessarily plot driven so much as it is just, let's hang out with these characters while they're hanging out together, basically.
Did you guys think that the grandma character was going to show up in the next episodes?
Originally.
Yeah. Like, I thought she was going to be a bigger part, but then when I was like doing research, I was like, oh, she literally was just in the pilot. Like, I thought that was like their kind of way of being like, look, here's an older person. Like, it seemed like they were trying to get every age group covered with the like characters. Like, they had the like young adults, like they had Ricky, and then they had a bunch of teens, and then they had like a tween, and then they had the little girl, and then they were like, oh, we need someone older, and so they threw grandma in the mix. And I thought for sure she was going to be a bigger part, but she wasn't.
I feel like it was weird. The show felt meta in a weird way, in that like I felt like bringing the grandma in was like, this is how the show usually would go. They would start living with grandma from this point on, but like they're not. And then even like they go on and on about how ridiculous grandma is, and then she comes on and like she's just a sweet
cool
person who's like, figure you guys are gonna be fine. Figure your stuff out.
Yeah, she's like perfectly likable.
Yeah,
yeah. On every step of the way, this show. And I appreciate. I'm not knocking it for it. I appreciate in every step of the way, this show steps back from being a sitcom cliche constantly. It's just like, it keeps making you think everybody's going to be so much more outrageous and ridiculous than they are.
Yeah.
And then they all are reasonable people.
Was I the only one who clocked that when it comes out that in the first episode, in the pilot, that Ricky Wilder is a registered nurse? Was I the only one who was like, but we just did a show about a registered nurse?
Yeah. And she also wore one of those weird dresses that I wasn't convinced were actually...
Yeah, she wore a TV nurse dress.
Yeah. A part of the 90s, but whatever. Maybe, anyone out there who's a nurse who was working in the 90s, did you wear one of those silly little dresses? Like, was that a thing?
Absolutely fantastic reveal of her being a nurse, of her coming home from work, bundled up in a cloak. And they're like, oh, how was your day? And she's like, it's terrible. These people they're always pawing at me and leering at me and all these things. And then she takes off her thing and she's a nurse and she's like, oh, doctors.
She set it up as if she worked with animals or something.
Yeah.
No, it was a good joke.
Doctors.
Yeah. Or you thought like, oh, she's like a cocktail waitress or she's like a,
Yeah.
But no, she's like a nurse. And yeah, it's...
Another great piece of exposition came in the first scene where the Melissa, the young one, the middle child,
yeah, Melissa, correct.
Where Melissa's writing a poem for school, and they ask her to read it, and she literally just sort of in like about a sentence and a half just sets up the status quo. Like she's just talking about like my parents are dead. My sister's raising me and I'm stuck with like my brother and his friends in this house. And I was like, very economically done show.
I mean, yeah, I found it a little annoying, like, but they doled out the backstory in a very concise way. It was
wonderfully done exposition. I really liked it.
I'll give them this. It's a very lean show.
Mm-hmm.
It's written in a very lean, efficient way. I wish I found it funnier.
Yeah.
I liked it. I liked it a lot, actually. I was surprised at how much I liked it.
There were two lines in the pilot that I did find kind of funny. One was that hotwire the car joke where what's the character's name? The Jerry O'Connell character? Brody. Where Brody is, arguing that he should get to go to this party and he wants the car keys and she won't give him the car keys. So he like storms out the front door. He's like, well, I'm just going to hotwire the car. Storms out the door, slams the door. Like 3 seconds later, comes back in like I'm going to hotwire a car.
Yeah. And I really like that too.
And then has to argue to get the car keys because obviously he's not going to do that. That was funny. And then I'm trying to remember the context of this one. The really bad at it was a line from from Dorfman where he says that Ricky is really bad at analogies, and I don't remember the exact lead up, but I thought that was like a funny aside from him.
I like that too. There's also J. Mohr has a really funny delivery of the Brody and Ricky are talking about the party and like she's like, what, this sounds like one of those crazy parties where there's gonna be like 100 people there, and like Brody's like, no, there's not gonna be like 100 people there, it's gonna be a lot more, like it's gonna be more down to earth, right Dorfman, how many people are gonna be there? And he's not paying attention. He goes, I don't know, like 100.
yeah because he's kind of spaced out in a 1992 skateboarder cliche sort of way.
Yeah.
I guess my biggest critique of this was it felt like they were spending a lot of time developing like schmaltzy touching moments between the characters that felt like it was kind of just laying that on a little thick for this early of a stage in a show where I'm like, I don't really know these people that well and I need like way more laughs before I get to the point of like that level of intimacy.
It was TGIF. That was built into the formula. And also nobody was serializing things then. So you're supposed to get it all in 1/2 hour no matter what. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
I think the things that we found weird about this show were literally because it was TGIF. Like the whole, like, you know, oh, you gotta bring grandma in, you gotta have multiple age groups, you gotta have weird little touching moments and moralizing. Like that's baked into the ABC TGIF formula. Like you have to have that. So yeah, so I think those are probably like network notes. So those are probably like the things that had to be in there, even if that wasn't like kind of true to the tone that Matthew Carlson, the creator, was like setting with this series.
Very fair point.
Well, I mean, Matthew Carlson is, you know, he's came from the Wonder Years, right? So he was used to the schmaltz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do feel like in the Wonder Years, though, there's something about the format of that show that's special. Like it kind of earns it because it kind of sets you up for like, this is going to be a sentimental look back at a time.
Yeah,
like
well,
it kind of...
well, I mean, Winnie's brother dies in the first episode.
Right.
Little bit of side research. You both may have discovered this, but evidently this show started as a made-for-TV movie called Camp Bicknell.
Bicknell, yeah, I did see that.
And also, apparently, so Jay Mohr was in that as well. Also called Dorfman.
But the sisters were different.
The sisters were different.
Yeah.
But Dorfman was in it, Jay Mohr, and apparently, I think that was his first role. Like Dorfman is Jay Mohr's. He was on MTV in some other like format, but in terms of like a scripted TV series type of thing like this, it was his first role.
That's weird, eh?
Interesting.
His first role was Dorfman.
Speaking of like network notes, that's a perfect segue into the next episode we watched. So we watched episode 17, and it's very clear that there have been some changes behind the scenes. Yeah,
there's been some retooling, for sure.
The first thing we find out immediately, and I imagine it has happened episodes before this, but we find out that Ricky has quit her nursing job to follow her dreams to become an oceanographer. And she works at a SeaWorld type place, which I don't think that's the place for an oceanographer. I think they mean marine biologist, but
is she a marine biologist that studied oceanography? Is that our ignorance? I don't know. Like, whatever.
Sure. I don't know. My beef would be that she specifies that she has a Bachelor of Science degree in oceanography in the dialogue. And I'm like, then how were you ever a nurse?
Yeah.
Well, I thought they were glazing over her nursing career, but they do bring it up later.
Yeah,
so at least there's that.
So the thing that right away, as soon as I started watching that episode, I was so confused. I was like, oh God, did they retool it and just like abandon her nursing, career, like, and not explain it? But then, of course, there is that scene where they're like, oh, you left that job to follow your dreams, da-da-da-da-da. So, but it still felt a little wedged in.
Yeah, they explain it just poorly.
What is the timeline of her education? Was she supposedly doing oceanography courses while she was working as a nurse?
Did she also have the necessary education and training to be a nurse?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or was she doing nursing off book?
Yeah, I don't know.
She also, and I loved finding this out halfway through the episode, she also has a penguin.
Yes. They had to add a penguin. Like, that seems like a very 90s, like, it kind of speaks to that whole thing that we saw in the Teddy Z episode where they're like, you gotta add an animal in there. You gotta... Like,
it was great. Yeah. The penguin is very cute. It's a baby penguin.
Very cute.
What is their long-term goal for having a baby penguin on the show? Is there going to be are they like, season 5, it's going to be a full-grown emperor penguin just waddling around the set? Like, what?
Like, are they going to dress it in Tina Majorino's, like, clothes and, like,
Oh, are they going to, like, is the show going to be like an E.T. thing where, like, she's bringing the penguin to school dressed up in, like, pearls and, like, glasses?
But it does not seem like something that's ethical for someone who is a marine biologist to, like, have a penguin in their frickin'... Oh,
yeah, I felt bad for the penguin. I was just like, it's not happy here.
Suburban home.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about the correct ecosystem for raising a penguin in captivity, but I know it's not suburban living room.
I know it. Yeah, I know it's not sitcom house.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also seemed like there were definitely notes to be like, oh, we got to get Ricky dating. We gotta get a love interest in there. And of course, this plot, like there is, this doctor that she has the hots for, and not like a hospital doctor, like a biologist doctor that she works with at the aquarium or SeaWorld or wherever the hell they work.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad that you made that Teddy Z reference, because one of my notes is the construct of this show feels a little inorganic, a little Teddy Z Network notes-ish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in this episode, just to sum it up for folks, we focus on Ricky's new job, and she has a hunky coworker that she's immediately smitten with, and she kind of dances around on the propriety of dating somebody she works with, as well as, she gets warned that, he's really broken from a past breakup, which doesn't really ever come back into play, but it's a big thing. And it also, comes in where she's like, I feel bad for this person. She doesn't really have a lot of friends. So her sounding board are, Danielle and Beth.
Yes. Like, why was she taking advice from teenagers?
I don't know. But also, like, why were they also like giving her kind of sound advice? Like, It wasn't like, I was like, why are they all on the same level here?
Yes. It was very contrived, and like these teenagers were way too worldly.
Yeah, no wonder nobody feels like she's parenting well, because like everybody is just equal footing in this house, whether you're 6 years old or 30.
Yeah, actually, one of the funny things about the premise of this show is that, going back to the start, it's supposed to be that all these teens like hanging out at her house because she's not like... because she's younger and she has this laissez-faire attitude toward parenting. So they get to just like be themselves, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that they're all like quite mature and well-behaved. So it's like, what difference does it make? They could be hanging out in the house of like one of their other parents, and it wouldn't make any difference because they're all just like put together.
They're free to be like their wild and crazy, well-adjusted selves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, maybe this comes up in an episode we didn't see, but there's nothing from their personalities as presented that you're thinking like, yeah, they're going to be like smoking weed and listening to loud music. And like, I was kind of picturing the sort of the characters from
that 70s show.
That'd be a good example. Yeah. I guess I was kind of picturing characters like on that 70s show hanging out in the basement and getting up to stuff that their parents wouldn't approve of, but like, she's only 28 and she's okay with it because she's cool, but none of that happens.
Yeah, and then they don't like comment on it. You know what I mean? Like, there's no, at least from the episodes we saw, like there's no like funny commentary. It's like, oh, we could do whatever we want. It's like, but we don't really do anything. Like, we are just so well behaved.
They're all just like mature and give good advice.
They're just nice kids.
But again, I know, like I keep harping on this, but again, I think it is an ABC thing. Like I think it is like, well, we got to sand off the edges. They can't be too bad. They got to be wholesome still. Like,
and it's weird.
That's what it is.
It's weird because I could watch a million shows like this where I can't take the Rachel Gunn RNs or I can't take the edgy stuff from the 90s. Like this, I'm like, this is fine. It goes down nice and easy. But yeah, anytime we get into any Married with Children territory, I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. Everybody's too mean.
Hello, wonderful listeners and fans of this podcast. We want to hear from you. Go to anchor.fm/thatwasashow and leave us a voice message, and we might play it in a future episode. Or email us at thatwasashow@aol.com, our 90s era email address, and we might read your message. Our lines are open, so call right now.
I have to say, the whole Ricky dating subplot, I found it amusing and relatable. Like, I found it very, like, relatable for, like, women who are maybe a little bit, like, awkward and, like, not as, like, assertive with dating and, like, kind of fumbling their way through it and having, like, the misunderstandings where they think it's a date, but it's not really a date. And, I found that like cute and relatable. I definitely in my single days, found myself in
Mhm.
that situation where it was like unclear or, oh, I think this guy likes me, but really there's like another woman in the background. And it's like, that's a whole thing. Like, I found it very cute and a good
Yeah.
like representation of someone who's like doesn't go out and date that often and, is.
It's well portrayed, and it's a great showcase for like Mary Page Keller, whereas
Yeah.
the episode wasn't before.
Yeah.
Like this one, like she's very
good.
funny. She's
Yeah.
very funny in it, very physical. It's great.
Yeah, she's good, and her command of her facial expressions is really top notch.
Yeah.
Like she
Mhm.
really sells a lot of her reactions to things like that.
Yeah.
So the hunky guy who's like the marine biologist or whatever he is.
Whatever
Yeah.
he is.
Um,
yeah.
So I had to look up the actor's name because
He's in everything.
instantly recognizable. He's that
Yeah.
guy who's in everything, but I didn't know his name. I feel like we should do like some sort of side episodes on these actors. But
Yeah.
Kevin Kilner has
has
triple digit credits on IMDb, obviously. And I thought he was a really good counterpoint for her because the whole shtick of like he's been under the sea in some like one of those single person like submarines, like research crafts where he was like alone for 7 months under the sea or something is a really good like funny backstory to why he's kind of socially awkward, and it makes a good counterpoint to her. And like I thought that actually worked pretty well.
They have with him, they do a bit of this joke in the first episode too, whereas every time you learn more about him, it's like a little bit more and more ridiculous. Like first there's that, and then she's like, oh, my penguin's sick. And then he's like, oh, that's okay. I lived in a penguin community for months.
Yeah.
And then she's just like, I can't believe I still want to date this guy. But like the first episode also has like this great bit of silliness where they're all at the party. And like they're talking about how awesome the party is, and off camera they just keep being like, "Oh yeah, did you get yogurt from the yogurt machine? Oh, did you go on the trampoline? Dude, you got to try these go-karts. Oh my god, look, the bassist from Pearl Jam is here." And it's always just off camera, but it's like keeps escalating to a silly I enjoy that style.
It's weird because the more we're talking about it, the more I'm seeing that it actually was a clever show. But there's something about it that in the moment I wasn't like picking up on all of these things, It wasn't like grabbing me,
Well, one thing I think might have been a lost opportunity with that Kevin Kilner character is that there's a joke where like near the end of that episode, she asks him to quit his job to avoid potential awkwardness.
That was great.
Even though it's clearly like the awkwardness is not his fault, but like, he's like, okay, I guess that's fair. And then I looked it up, and it's the only episode he's in, and they did produce 3 more episodes after this. So it seems like the character did quit his job, and
No, because that was a joke, and they also get together at the end of the episode.
Yes,
he
they get together at the end of the episode, but I checked, and he's not in the next episode.
Well, they just might not have written him in at that point.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he would have come back had the series continued beyond episode 20. But I feel like what was maybe a missed opportunity is that I thought those two played off each other well, and I would have used that as a will they or won't they. In other words, I would not have had them get together at the end of that episode. I would have left it at this sort of awkward, maybe they like each other, the sort of kiss, have them part ways, and then I would have milked that for a good season and a half because he's funny, they're good together.
My gut feeling about that is that this might have been one of the only episodes that focused on Ricky at work, because you can't have that many plot lines so divorced from 90% of your cast. Like,
good point.
They have to figure out a way to get the story back in the house because that's where the characters are.
That's supposed to be the main premise.
Yeah. I think this was a one-off. Like, we see her in her new career. I don't think we would have gotten a lot of her at work. Because this episode seems to set up a lot of jokes about her work. So they're getting them in.
Fair point.
I think Kilner would have come back. I think so.
So the other actor that we see in that scene at her work, who is a very recognizable figure, Don Lake, had to look his name up too, but he's also in a million things. And I always enjoy his presence in a scene like this.
He was funny. Like, that was a funny character, you know?
Especially because when he shows up, you're like, oh, he's going to be like, we've just watched so many of these bad 90s sitcoms that I'm like immediately cringing about her like older male coworker.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, he's just also goofy and nice too. So never mind. He's fine.
Yeah. I liked that little beat where they were he was like telling her some war stories basically. And she was like, what was Flipper like?
All of those really, all of that really played for me because like they're just like, I love the awe they gave all of all of those characters in their work. They're all so into it, and I thought that was a nice.
And then he's like,
change.
"Oh, you got to write a memoir," and then he's like, "One day, Rick."
And apparently his job is like in charge of feeding the animals, and he made a reference to one of these famous celebrity animals liking a certain type of fish.
Oh, it's Flipper.
It was Flipper.
Flipper like he likes different types of smelt
or something.
Oh,
or
he likes Alaskan smelt.
Oh, boy.
So that was kind of funny.
I also really like. It's hard to even explain because you'd have to just watch the scene. But there's this awkward bit of physical comedy that is played out in the office where she is talking to hunky Kevin Kilner and like talking him into like asking somebody out at work. And then she's waiting for him to ask her out and he doesn't. And she just kind of keeps backing up out of the room, waiting for him to ask her out and like kind of like keeps like angling back in to be like, no? Are you gonna say so? No, okay.
Turns away and then looks back as if, oh, did I hear you say? No, I didn't hear you say.
Goes
something.
on for like a minute and a half, and it could not be like a better bit of physical comedy.
Yeah.
My last note was basically about wardrobe. I just wanted to know if, I mean, you in particular, Brynn, if you had an opinion on particularly like Beth and Melissa's giant hats, like giant 90s hats and stuff like that.
It was like the Blossom era. So you had a lot of flipped up brim hats with like a sunflower on them. Like it was like a lot of hats. It was a lot of
hats.
The Melissa character was wearing the biggest beret I have ever seen.
Yes. It was like a lot of girls with like that feathered parted hair in the front and like a flipped up hat. Like, you know, lots of like gingham little like dresses. And it was a very 90s, maximum 90s fashion moment.
Dorfman too.
Oh,
Dorfman has a lot of like 90s boy.
Baseball caps.
Big shirt over top of other shirt.
Yeah, like lots of layered shirts and...
And I feel like we really should mention the gag that does recur where Dorfman skateboards toward the door of the house and expects someone to just open the door at the last moment. And in the pilot, they do. And he like slides in on a skateboard and kick flips it up. And then I forget if this was a callback later in the pilot or if this was in episode 17 where she doesn't open the door and he crashes into the door.
Yep.
I completely missed that.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
But that is cute.
Yeah.
Another reason for me to suspect that he's a Kramer inspired character.
He's absolutely, you know what? I'll give it to you. He's a Kramer. He's a neighbor. You know, he's a wacky neighbor. He's much more likable than an Urkel.
Yes.
It's so funny that after all of this, we didn't talk a lot about Jerry O'Connell. And like, I love Jay Mohr, so I was like, oh, Jay Mohr. But I was also like, oh, young Jerry O'Connell, this could be fun. And he's just, he's fine. He just kind of.
He's good. He's
always good. Yeah.
He just serves that like Jerry O'Connell. I'm like the leading boy. He was like the leading boy of the 90s, you know?
It's funny because you could easily.
He's like your Kirk Cameron. He's like he's like I'm the kind of cute like leading boy who's the like anchor of the crew.
You could easily switch them.
Yes.
Like you could have Jay Mohr as the level-headed one, and you could have Jerry O'Connell as the dumb friend.
Yeah.
Would be just as fine. Yeah.
Let's get into 6 Degrees of Friends.
Yes, let's.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, this one was kind of interesting, right? So there are two different 2-degree separations between Camp Wilder and Friends. The first one, okay, you guys might not like it, but I'll explain why. So when we first started this podcast, I was doing the 6 degrees of Friends a little bit more liberally, where I was like, okay, literally any movie that someone was in, like anything, whether it's a movie or TV show, if they co-star with a Friends star, it counts. Then we kind of like made it a little more strict, and we were like, okay, it has to be sitcoms. But for this first one, it's through Jay Mohr. So the 2-degree separation is basically Jay Mohr played Dorfman on Camp Wilder, as everyone knows by now. He also co-starred with Jennifer Aniston in the movie Picture Perfect. Okay. And then obviously Jennifer Aniston played Rachel Green on Friends. So that's 2 degrees. The reason I felt okay about this connection is because that was basically her first movie. Well, not her first movie, but it was very much like kind of like a spiritual connection to Friends. Like it was very much the same tone of Friends. Like she was basically Rachel Green, but in a movie. Yeah. So I count it.
I have no problem with that. I don't think we've ever said you can't use movies. It's just we're like, stop using the same
director. Aaron.
It was just don't use directors.
Yeah,
you're saying.
I would say, my opinion on that wavers. Sometimes I feel like it's
very the same era as our movies.
Sometimes I feel like it's more pure to keep it to sitcoms, but I'm okay with movies. I think my biggest thing was that it be through the cast as opposed to writers or producers or directors and stuff like that.
At any rate, he was her co-star. I feel like that might have been one of, it wasn't his first movie, but it was like one of the things where he got to be kind of a leading man, where he's like the romantic.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of a cute movie. But anyway, yeah. And then the other 2-degree separation is through Mary Page Keller, who of course played Ricky Wilder on Camp Wilder. She had a recurring role on Sybil.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Alongside Dee Dee Pfeiffer. And as we established in a previous episode, Dee Dee Pfeiffer guest starred on Friends.
Nice.
Yeah.
Woo. That's good. Actually, to be honest, when you said like you guys may not like
you thought I was going to be mad about you.
I thought it was going to be
mad about you, but I didn't.
I was like, as long as it's not Phoebe Buffay, I'll be fine with it.
Yeah.
We were going right to Ursula Buffay and Phoebe Buffay.
Yeah. All right. And so the spin-off, I mean, this one, it was like, okay, it's a stacked cast. It's full of like very, very successful performers, one of which has an Oscar. So it's like, it was kind of wrote itself. I will just, I'll start with the show's creator. Why not? Matthew Carlson. He is a very prolific like showrunner, producer, writer. Soon after this show, he actually created Townies, which we covered in a previous episode. We all know the fate of Townies, but, he still went on to do lots of other stuff. He also worked on Malcolm in the Middle, which was like a very successful show in the late 90s, early 2000s. And, he's worked steadily since. Fun fact, he's currently working on a Mighty Ducks series for the Disney Channel. That's starring Emilio Estevez as Gordon Bombay from the movies, and Lauren Graham, who he worked with on Townies. So it's kind of funny. So it's like very 90s, like, and very like family friendly 90s. He's like, oh, this is what I know. So.
Well, we are in the golden age of the 90s reboot.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that show's going into a second or third season by now.
I think it is, yeah. So he's currently working on that. So of the main cast, Megan Halderman and Margaret Langrick seem to have kind of retired from acting. Like they seem to be part of that trend of a lot of young actors in the 90s who were in all kinds of stuff in the 90s. They were in all kinds of stuff as children and as teens, and then they just kind of were like, all right, I'm done. I got my like acting money for all these years, and now I'm gonna go off and do what I really want to do with my life. That's kind of what it seems to be the case for them.
I mean, Brynn, I love how optimistic you are, where you're like, they chose not to work anymore, whereas
Well-
really, maybe they just weren't getting hired anymore.
Maybe, I don't know, but I'm trying to be positive, Barry.
I was like, that is such a nice way of looking at it. We're like, yeah, they decided they were done.
Yeah. Well, and as everyone knows, Hilary Swank went on to star in several motion pictures. Her first breakout role in films was The Next Karate Kid. So she played the girl Karate Kid.
Probably been like a year after this.
Yes, exactly. Like a year after her stint on Camp Wilder. And then, of course, she did the film Boys Don't Cry, $1 Million Baby, and most recently she was in The Hunt. Tina Majorino, somebody who I remember a lot from childhood. She was in everything. Like she was one of those kid actors.
I love her.
She kind of took off after this show. So she became a big movie star of a child actor, starring in Corinna, Andre, which was a favorite of mine as a kid. I really liked that, where she was with the seal. So she got to act with a penguin and then a seal. So it's kind of exciting. Lucky. And Waterworld. So she was in famously, she was the kid in Waterworld.
Oh my God, you're right.
Yes. And then, so she was in those movies like back to back to back. So she was like a big star back then. And then she sort of like, she was in a few more things throughout the 90s. And then she sort of like disappeared for a few years and then reappeared in Napoleon Dynamite. It was kind of one of those things where, everybody saw Napoleon Dynamite when it came out. It was like such a big movie. And it was like she reappeared. I was like, oh yeah, Tina Majorino.
Yeah.
She reappeared. I was like, what happened to her? She's back. And then she was like in several other things after that. And she's still working. She's still got credits from like 2020. So
she was she ended up playing Veronica Mars's best friend for most of that show.
Yeah.
She was on Big Love.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
So she got some good roles again. So, but maybe she took a break to be in school. I don't know. But she had this weird kind of 4 or 5 year gap where it was she was this big star and then she kind of disappeared and then reappeared. So interesting. And then of course we have our friend Jay Mohr, who again, another person who I find a comfort because he was in everything that I watched in the 90s. So after his time on Camp Wilder, he briefly joined the cast of SNL. So it's kind of weird because you mentioned he was in MTV shows. So he's had a wild career. He was kind of this probably young personality on MTV, and somebody like Matthew Carlson was probably oh, he's kind of a cool, charming young guy. Let's put him in the sitcom. And then someone saw that and we were like, oh, let's put him in SNL. So he definitely had some presence that people really responded to at that time. And then he kind of became the king of 90s, I don't know, comedies. So he was in a lot of movies.
Well, he's a stand-up too. So
yes. He has a charm to him. So some of his memorable roles were Jerry Maguire, Picture Perfect, which I already mentioned, Suicide Kings, Go, and Pay It Forward. And then he also starred in the short-lived series Action, which was another Jonathan Wolf sitcom, which we have to cover.
Which we will definitely cover.
Yeah, we will.
We'll cover. We'll cover.
And he's still going strong. Jerry O'Connell, who was already a certified child star, having done several movies, and he had several, shows under his belt. He was he had My Secret Identity and
Stand By Me.
Yes, yeah. He was already a star. And, Camp Wilder being a flop didn't slow him down at all. I'm not going to list all of his credits because there's a lot, but I'll just shout out some recent ones that I enjoyed. He was on the very amazing Quibi series that no one has seen called Flipped with Caitlin Olsen and Will Forte. And he basically played him and his real wife, Rebecca Romaine, were basically one of these HGTV couples that would like flip houses. And Caitlin Olsen was like her character is very jealous of them and tries to like be a rival of them in her own series, but she's like just terrible. So R.I.P. Quibi, like that was actually like a really fun short format series. And then he's also made several appearances on Drunk History, which are very fun.
That's fun.
But it's Jerry O'Connell. He's everywhere, anywhere and everywhere. And then, like Jerry O'Connell, Mary Page Keller did not slow down after Camp Wilder. She's worked very steadily since the 90s. And, her most recent credit is a recurring role on Pretty Little Liars. Mind you, that show ended back in 2017, so we haven't seen much of her since then. But, who knows? She's still, will probably pop up in other things because she's a very talented performer. And that's all I got.
That's all right. That was a good one. They all had a lot of fun stuff. I get a kick out of I was just thinking about it. I was like, oh, that's weird. Jerry O'Connell and Jay Mohr, they were both in Jerry Maguire together. Yeah. And then I was like, wait, that was only 3 years after this.
Which is wild because they're playing teenagers.
They're playing teenagers. Yeah. And then like Jay Mohr is so 3 years later, like Jay Mohr playing like a hotshot agent who like steals Jerry O'Connell from Jerry Maguire. And it's so funny to see how different they both are 3 years down the line from this.
Yeah.
And for anybody out there who misses Quibi, Roku picked up all their stuff, so
it's
all on Roku now, guys.
Yeah, there was some really good stuff on Quibi, I have to say. I really enjoyed the show Dummy, which was like starring Anna Kendrick, right? Yeah. It's quite good.
So let's check in with our good buddy, Mr. Producer, and I guess see if he has any thoughts to add on this.
Do we have to?
Yes. Hello, Aaron.
Hi, Mr. Producer.
I got that who calls me ID, so I knew it was you.
Yes. You told me that last time.
No, I really don't think so. So what are you little guys doing on your little radio show this week?
We're talking about Camp Wilder.
Yes, that Matty Carlson project. Interesting little show.
Did you know anyone who worked on it?
Well, sure I did, because I was one of them.
You worked on this one.
I sure did, kid. The studio brought me in to do some cleanup mid-season. Let's just say I had some notes.
Oh, really? What kind of things?
I bet I even got some of them around here. Let me look for them.
Well, I don't need the actual notes.
Jeremy, bring me my 1992 box.
The file, Mr. Producer?
No, the box.
There's a file. There's a box in a bag. They all say 1992 on them.
It's a big year, kid. Get up. Hold on a second. Let me go see what's going on back there.
Maybe I should call back.
He sounds like he's got it.
Aaron, I'm confused. Is he in an office or just an old apartment?
I don't know. I've never met him in person.
What? No. That was just my pickle recipes.
How many different pickle recipes could there even be?
I think we should just hang up, guys.
He'll be back.
I've got another podcast to record in like a half hour, guys.
Really? Which one?
I lied. I have nothing.
All right. Sorry about that, kid. I got my notes right here. That kid, I swear, that Jeremy, he's going to be the death of me.
Oh, well, thank you. You really didn't have to go to all that trouble.
It's no trouble, kid. It was in the box, the 1992 box. Okay, let's see here. What do we got here? Okay. Camp Wilder Retooling Notes by Anthony Producer. Okay, here we got here. January 16th, 1993. And what does it say here? It says, this show needs a penguin.
Oh, that was you? What else?
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
How much did they pay you for that?
A lot.
All right. Well, do either of you have any final thoughts on the show? Barry, I know you said that you quite liked this show. Anything else to add?
I mean, let's take the word quite out and just say I liked it. I found it very easy to watch because I like all these people and they were kind of funny. But my final thought is Camp Wilder, more like Camp Milder.
Yeah. I mean, I don't understand why it was called Camp Wilder.
It was.
Is the implication that it's like, oh, it's fun. It's like summer camp at this house.
Yeah,
I don't know.
the thing that I read in a description of the show was that the teenagers nicknamed her house Camp Wilder because it's this place where they go to hang out and somehow
be very mild.
Yeah.
At least they called it that because then I knew their name was Wilder because I don't think they ever say their name.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I've kind of come around a little bit like you did, Brynn, in discussing the show and thinking like maybe I like this better than my initial reaction when I was watching it, like deconstructing some of the things that they were trying to do. I feel like given a little bit more runway to sort a few of the inconsistencies out, and maybe to like develop the humorous side of things a little bit more, but like given that they only aired 19 episodes and we only watched a couple of them, like, yeah, if this show had been given more time, it
might have been okay.
Developed into something I'd want to watch. Yeah, I mean, like you said, like TGIF shows, that kind of family-friendly sitcom where there's a certain degree of moralizing built in was never something I gravitated to hugely, but like, yeah, I like the cast. I like some of the things they were doing. I could have definitely watched a lot more of Ricky Wilder's life outside of tending to the teenagers, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Like let's put it this way: this aired with Step by Step. This is much.
Right.
This is much better than Step by Step.
Yeah, it is truly.
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Low bar, I know, but Step by Step was on forever.
Yeah.
And cut to credits. That Was a Show is created and hosted by Brynn Byrne, Andrew Barry Helmer, and myself, Aaron Yeger. It's a production of Radio Gizmo in Toronto, Canada. Subscribe, rate, review, and share. Follow us on Instagram and tell your friends about it. That Was a Show?
Radio Gizmo.